Discover the miraculous transformations and divine revelations in 2 Kings, Faith Unveiled. In the days when Ahab ruled over Israel, during the tumultuous times of desperation and idolatry, a widow in Shunem faced a dire trial. Her husband, a revered prophet of Yahweh, had recently passed away, leaving her in a grievous plight, burdened by the heavy yoke of debts. Her heart quaked in fear as creditors circled, threatening to take her two beloved sons as payment, a fate worse than death. One sweltering afternoon, news whispered through the dusty streets of Shunem that Elisha the prophet was in nearby Gilgal. With hope flickering within her like a fragile candle in a storm, the widow gathered her sons' faces etched with worry and set off on the dusty path to find the man of God. Praying silently for a miracle, she trudged onward, determined to seek salvation from her anguish. When she finally reached Elisha, he sat beneath the spreading branches of a fig tree surrounded by townsfolk. The widow fell at his feet, her voice trembling with emotion as she recounted her tale of grief and despair. "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil," she implored, her heart aching like an empty vessel itself. Elisha, with divine wisdom shrouded in compassion, looked deep within her soul. "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house?" His words were like lifelines thrown into her troubled sea. In that moment, something stirred in her, a glimmer of faith. "Go," Elisha instructed, "borrow vessels from all your neighbors' empty vessels. Do not gather just a few." Her heart filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Could such an improbable task yield divine results? Yet, she obeyed, her faith outweighing her doubts. She urged her sons to join her, and together they scurried from house to house, collecting vessels of every size, their hearts beating in sync with the promise of God's provision. Returning home, she stood before her single, humble jar of oil, the remnants of a life now shrouded in loss. "Pour into each vessel," Elisha commanded, his voice unwavering. With hands that shook with uncertainty, she began to pour, whispering silent prayers, pleading for a miracle. To her astonishment, as the oil flowed freely from the jar, her empty vessels began to fill one after another, until each brimmed full. The miracle unfolded before her eyes, radiating warmth and wonder, stirring her spirit from despair to hope. Yet, even as joy ignited within her, doubt flickered in the shadows of her heart. Was this truly a manifestation of God's grace or merely her imagination running wild? "Bring me another vessel," she called to her sons, anxiety dancing in her chest. But her heart trembled at the lingering fear. Would this abundance be enough to deliver them from the grip of ruin? The last vessel filled, and as the sweet scent of oil hung in the air, the flow ceased. Here she stood, awash in the blessed miracle yet facing the looming threat of her creditors. How would she confront them? Each vessel was filled, yet she felt the weight of her circumstances pressing heavily upon her soul. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, her heart wrestling with faith and despair. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. What lay ahead would test the depth of her faith, as a divine resolution awaited in the shadows, the promise of hope intertwining with her desperate plea. The widow, filled with wonder yet burdened by uncertainty, stood amidst the gathered vessels, their glimmer reflecting her turmoil. The oil that had flowed seamlessly now lay resting in the fullness of God's provision, yet her heart remained unsettled. With trembling hands, she placed the last vessel down, her thoughts a tempest as the memories of impending doom loomed ever closer. "Go," said Elisha, his voice breaking through the cacophony of her doubts. "Sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest." The words wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace, but still, she grappled with fear. How would they sustain themselves after paying what was owed? Exhaling deeply, she dared to believe, stepping forth in faith. "Yes, my lord," she responded, her voice steadier than her heart. With newfound determination, she filled her son's hands with the precious vessels, their eyes alight with hope and wonder, chasing away the shadows that had once threatened to engulf their lives. As she traversed back through Shunem, each step resonated with the rhythm of faith. Word had spread, and neighbors looked on with curiosity, some with incredulity. Among them was a merchant, a man of few words and great wealth. Seeing her laden with the vessels, he approached, curiously asking, "What has befallen you, widow?" "The prophet of God has shown me mercy," she replied, the oil glistening in the sun as it swayed in unison with her heart, "and has filled my vessels beyond measure." The merchant nodded thoughtfully, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Though he belonged to a world of commerce and calculation, he felt a divine whisper threading through the air, a pull towards the miraculous unfolding before him. Interwoven in the widow's tale was the humor of God's sovereign plan, one thread illuminating another with hidden significance. Upon reaching the marketplace, she began to pour forth the oil, and to her astonishment, traders came forth offering her silver for the precious liquid. As her purse filled, so too did her spirit. With each transaction, she sensed the culmination of God's promise unfurling in miraculous harmony. Debt melted away, hope blossomed, expanding like the vastness of a field under the gentle gaze of the sun. As dusk descended on the horizon, her debt settled and her heart miraculously lightened, she returned home. Entering with her sons, she poured out her heart in praise, revealing their deliverance to the only one who was worthy. "You have been my stronghold, my deliverer," she sang in joyous worship. But unbeknownst to her, in the shadows of Shunem's streets, the merchant who had witnessed her fervent faith began to seek the prophets, wondering if more miracles lay beyond the threshold of a widow's obedience. The tales of Elisha reached not just the humble but the proud, igniting a divine search among those who had long despaired of the truth. As the widow prepared to rest, she fell on her knees before Yahweh, her heart echoing the promises fulfilled. Little did she know how her story would ripple through generations, as God's tapestry continued to weave together his sovereign will. The whispers of his plans extended, reaching even the hearts of those who would embrace or reject the message of his love. What lay ahead for the widow and her family would intertwine with a greater revelation, one that would echo in eternity, promising a deeper understanding of faith and the essence of God's abundant grace. She had learned the power of God's provisions, but now a divine whisper beckoned her to the next chapter of faith, a chapter where the miraculous mingled with the mundane in ways yet unfathomed. As the night deepened and the stars twinkled in their celestial dance, the widow pondered the wonders God had wrought in her life. Her heart, once heavy with despair, now burst forth with thanksgiving. Yet, in the stillness, a thought shimmered in her mind. What would become of her sons? Would they bear witness to such wonders in their own lives? In the dawn's early light, she roused her boys, their hearts still brimming with the joy of miraculous provision. "Today, our lives will be changed," she proclaimed, for a voice whispered within her an urging to teach them the ways of the Lord, to let them understand that every blessing is a thread in God's grand design. "Come, let us share our story. Let us testify to the greatness of our God." With little more than hope and determination, they ventured back into Shunem, where her encounters with the townspeople formed a tapestry rich in the holy. Men and women, drawn by the tales that danced on the lips of the widow, eagerly awaited her return. "Is it true?" a woman named Miriam called from the crowd. "Is it true that oil can flow endlessly?" "Yes," the widow replied, her voice resonating with the fervor of her encounter with Elisha. "For the Lord provides, and what we seemingly lack, he grants in abundance." Curiosity turned to awe as merchants gathered, eager to hear her words. The merchant who had spoken to her before, his heart moved yet again, stood at the forefront, eyes alight with hunger for the divine. "Brothers and sisters, hear her!" he exclaimed. "Here stands a woman favored by God. Let us learn from her faith." With each testimony, seeds of hope were sown within the community, growing in the hearts of those present. The widow shared how she had faced the threat of losing her sons, yet God had poured out his blessing through Elisha's direction. "What he gave me was beyond mere oil. It was life, it was deliverance. Her voice rang clear, compelling all to listen, and in their hearts, a glimmer of something greater ignited. As the crowd responded with murmurs of encouragement and shouts of praise, the widow perceived that her joy, once so intimately bound to survival, had transformed into a call and obligation to spread God's mercy through faith that inspired and uplifted those around her. Yet, shifting shadows lingered at the edge of the gathering. Somewhere within the throng, an elder stood still, his heart hardened. "What is this nonsense?" he scoffed. "Do we not toil for our living? Do we trust in oil to solve our problems?" Doubt and skepticism formed a stark contrast against the rising faith. But the widow, sensing the tension, raised her voice in prayer, imploring the Lord to soften his heart. "O Yahweh, let your truth penetrate the stony places," she beseeched. "Reveal yourself to those who would doubt, for you are the God of mercy and grace." As she prayed, the elder's countenance changed, an internal struggle unfolding. He had seen much in his years but now stood at the precipice, wondering if perhaps he too had surrendered to a life without faith. In the moments that followed, something remarkable happened. Conversations shifted from the mundane to the miraculous. Lives intertwined as the community began to share their own stories, recounting times when they, too, had experienced the Lord's hand. Little did they know, within this gathering lay a thread of destiny woven into the very fabric of Israel's future. The Spirit of God moved among them, awakening dormant faith and lighting a path toward a deeper revelation. What began with the widow's cry was transforming Shunem into a place of divine encounters. Each heart was a vessel for God's purpose, reminding them all of a promise yet to be fulfilled, a promise that would declare His love generationally. And as they lifted their voices in praise, a wisdom beyond understanding echoed, whispering through the streets, "For where faith prevails, even the smallest acts can ripple into God's sovereign plan." As the sun reached its zenith, casting its warm embrace upon Shunem, the widow's heart swelled with gratitude. She gazed upon the assembly, her children's joyful faces illuminating her spirit. "Behold," she proclaimed, "what great things the Lord has done. He has turned our mourning into dancing and our need into plenty." With her words, she felt an unshakable conviction rising from within. The townspeople, once set in their ways, now looked at one another with newfound hope. They recounted stories of personal struggles, barrenness, sickness, and drought, and how, through trials, they too had experienced glimpses of God's grace. As the widow spoke of her miraculous deliverance, the elder who had questioned her earlier stood, wrestling with a tempest in his soul. This miracle, could it be the evidence of the living God among us? He pondered aloud, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. "Indeed, it can," a humble farmer declared, stepping forward. "Once, my crops failed, and I despaired, but the Lord guided my hands to plant anew, and in His time, He restored my fields." The crowd murmured in understanding, reflecting upon their own experiences of God's providence. The air became electric with revelation, as each person shared their burden, only to have it transformed into a testimony of faith. Amidst this growing fervor, the widow looked to her sons, whose faces mirrored the hope that flared like flames, igniting a passion for the God of their ancestors. "Let us remember the words of the prophet Jeremiah," she urged, "for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Her declaration deepened the roots of faith in their hearts. As the gathering erupted in praises, the elder fell to his knees, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Forgive my doubt, O Lord," he cried out. "I have seen the light of your workings through this widow's life and the lives of my neighbors." In that moment, the heavens seemed to pause, the divine presence sweeping through the assembly. The widow pressed onward, "Let us not forget our mission. We, who have tasted the goodness of the Lord, must labor to bring forth faith in others." Her proclamation resonated like a trumpet, awakening the slumbering within those around her. Just then, a mighty wind stirred the gathered assembly, echoing the whisper of the Holy Spirit penetrating their hearts. A young girl in the crowd, who had been mute until this day, opened her mouth and proclaimed, "Great is your faithfulness, O God. Your mercies are new every morning. The crowd erupted in praise, for the power of God had not just moved them to recognize testimonies but had also manifested miracles. The elder stood, rejuvenated, raising his hands to heaven. What is impossible with man is possible with God. He exclaimed with a newfound resolve, echoing the words of the one who walked among them. But even as they rejoiced, a shadow flickered at the edge of their collective joy and news of a distant army approaching, drawn by the reports of miraculous happenings in Shunem. Whispers of impending conflict spread through the crowd like wildfire, fear igniting amidst the flames of hope. Even now, the widow sensed the stirring of God's sovereign plan. "Do not fear," she declared, her voice rising above the tumult, "for just as the oil flowed without end, so too shall God's protection envelop us." With hearts conflicted yet stirred by faith, the people of Shunem stood united. For, in this moment of trial, what would they choose? Would they cling to the fears of the world, or would they embrace the promise of God in faith? As they awaited the unfolding of God's purpose, the widow realized this was not merely about the survival of her family or provisions. There was a greater call on their lives, a divine convergence of faith and action, a calling that would impact generations yet to come. And as the sun began to set, casting golden rays upon Shunem, a whisper echoed in the hearts of the faithful, "For the shadow of uncertainty is but a backdrop for the brilliance of my plans, and soon, you shall see the fullness of my purposes revealed." As the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the skies with hues of crimson and gold, a weighty silence descended upon the assembly gathered in Shunem. With hearts still buoyed by the widow's proclamation, the people now stood at the precipice of fear and faith, their thoughts swirling like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. The air was charged with anticipation, for the promise of the Lord had been spoken, yet the shadows of impending danger loomed ever closer. "Listen!" cried a voice among the crowd. One of the youths, his eyes wide with alarm, pointed toward the distant hills where dark figures gathered. "The army draws near. What shall we do?" Panic rippled through the crowd, and a murmur of uncertainty took root, threatening to overshadow the seeds of hope. The widow clasped her hands, raising them high to still the fears that echoed in the hearts of her people. "Be not afraid," she implored, her voice like a beacon cutting through the darkness. "Have we not seen the hand of God deliver us? Did he not bring forth life where there was death? Do not let fear overshadow the truth of his promises." With her eyes gleaming with fervor, she recalled the words of the Lord from the past, the tales of battles fought and won, the songs of deliverance sung as they crossed the Red Sea. "For it is written, the Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still," she declared, and her spirit kindled a flame of resolve among the people. Yet the elder, still on his knees, rose with a trembling voice. "Though we see the might of our foes approaching," he spoke, "we must remember that our God is a warrior. He fights for the oppressed, and he shall protect his own." His faith ignited something within the hearts of the assembled, stirring them from the depths of their despair. "I will go and beseech the prophet Elisha," he then declared. "For through him, we may know the mind of the Lord." The people nodded, their hopes rising as they considered how God had spoken through the prophet before. The widow, sensing the need for unity, said, "Let us go together. We shall fast and pray, beseeching him to protect us, for the prayers of the righteous avail much." And so, with one heart and one spirit, the townsfolk of Shunem joined in fervent prayer, lifting their voices in unison, calling upon the name of the Lord. As the sun finally set, darkness enveloped the land, yet within their hearts, a holy light flickered brightly. They recognized that in the face of insurmountable odds, their God was greater. Even now, in this dark hour, trust in his promises. The widow reminded them. For God uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. As they prayed, the winds shifted, and a stillness fell upon Shunem. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the horizon, riding in haste. It was Elisha, the man of God, his face set with urgency and purpose. The elder rushed to him, breathless with anticipation, recounting the plight of their people. "Fear not," Elisha spoke, his voice resonant with authority. For those who are with us are more than those who are against us." He raised his hands to the heavens, and eyes wide with expectation surged among the people, for they sensed the atmosphere thickening with the presence of the Almighty. Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open their eyes so they may see." And as the shadows loomed ever closer, the people were granted a glimpse of a troop of angels, fiery and radiant, surrounding them. In that moment, the hearts of Shunem were transformed. They became aware that the army of heaven stood ready to defend them, steeled by the hands of the Lord. The widow recognized that this was but the beginning of a great deliverance, a divine orchestration of faith that would echo through generations. And as the wind shifted once more, she held on to the truth that greater is he who is in them than he who is in the world. For at this very hour, the fullness of God's sovereign plan was unfolding, waiting to be revealed among his people. As dawn broke, piercing the blanket of night with rays of brilliance, the people of Shunem stood steadfast. The promise of Elisha echoed in their hearts, and they remained resolute, their faith tempered like steel in fire. Yet, they knew the battle was not won merely by sight alone, they were called to a deeper understanding of the God who fights for them. Elisha, bathed in the morning light, turned to the anxious crowd. "The Lord has granted you sight, but today, you shall experience his hand in action. Gather what you have, for we shall not face our foes with swords of flesh and blood, but with faith that moves mountains." His voice commanded the gathering, infusing them with boldness. "Let us prepare," the widow urged. "For the Lord has spoken through his prophet. We shall take what we have and surrender it to the Almighty. In his hands, 5 loaves and 2 fish can feed the multitude." Elisha instructed them, "Bring forth your provisions. Every morsel shall be multiplied, for where there is faith, there is abundance." The people, fueled by his words, brought forward what they could offer, grains, fruits, and whatever remnants remained from the night before. As they laid their humble offerings before the prophet, Elisha lifted his hands high toward heaven, invoking the name of the Lord. "O Lord of hosts, receive these gifts, and let your miracle unfold." A hush fell upon the assembly as the prophet blessed the offerings. The loaves began to multiply before their eyes, replenishing those with empty stomachs and lifting the spirits of the despondent. The people gasped in awe, their collective faith knitting them closer together in hope. Then, sensing a shifting of the spirit about him, Elisha commanded, "Go forth and deliver food to our brothers and sisters in the fields, those who tirelessly labor against the fear that lies beyond." With urgency, they moved as one, driven by a newfound strength as they took the bread now multiplied and spread it far and wide. Meanwhile, in the distance, the army that had threatened them drew nearer. Yet, as the sun's rays glinted off their armor, fear was replaced by the thrill of faith amongst the Shunamites. "See how the Lord provides," they murmured, their voices a chorus of newfound confidence, for they trusted that their God was with them. A young boy among the crowd, emboldened by what he had witnessed, ventured forth. He sought to speak with Elisha. "Man of God," he called out, "can we not arm ourselves and go to meet the enemy with our provisions, both in battle and in faith?" Elisha turned to him, his eyes twinkling with divine wisdom. "You are wise, child, but remember, our fight is not against flesh and blood. Our weapons are spiritual, for our God goes before us. Prepare your hearts for what is to come, and trust in his providence." In their hearts, the collective spirit of the crowd ignited. They understood that God was working a greater miracle not merely in the multiplication of bread but in the preparation of their hearts to confront the foe with courage, faith, and miraculous provision. As the sun climbed higher, shadows of the enemy tried to encroach upon the land, yet the Shunamites stood firm. The widow raised her voice once more, "Remember his promises. For the battle is the Lord's, and he shall deliver us." As they prayed, the ground trembled slightly, not from fear but anticipation, a divine portent of what was to unfold. For through the provision he had multiplied and the strength he had instilled, God's sovereign hand was orchestrating a deliverance that would reveal not only his might but the depth of his unending love. And as the dust kicked up from the approaching army obscured the horizon, the people of Shunem stood on the brink of witnessing the fullness of God's plan, a revelation that would change their understanding of faith and the nature of his deliverance forever. Thus, the day would become legendary, a testament to the unwavering faith of a united people that sought the Lord in their hour of need, whose actions were about to echo through the ages. As the sun forged higher in the heavens, illuminating the fear that had gripped the hearts of many, Elisha stood before the people, their faces a blend of anticipation and reverence. He sensed the shifting atmosphere, a thickening of divine presence, and he lifted his voice, calling forth a deeper understanding. "Hear me, Israel. Today, the Lord shall manifest his power in ways unseen, a testament to his steadfast love and mercy." The gathered throng leaned closer, their ears attuned as they clutched their offerings. In a moment of profound silence, Elisha began to pray, his fervent supplication ascending towards God. "O Lord, reveal your might and show the world your power. Let our faith resound as one, that our enemies may know that you are God alone." The wind stirred, a whisper of the Spirit brushing through the crowd as the prayer hung pregnant in the air, pregnant with expectancy. Then, far on the horizon, the enemy army pressed onward, confident in their numbers, yet unaware of the divine showdown soon to unfold. Suddenly, as if in response to Elisha's prayer, the ground beneath their feet trembled, even the heavens seemed to respond, a tumultuous swell of clouds gathering ominously overhead, casting shadows upon the earth. The people gazed up, fear creeping back into hearts not yet anchored. "Be not afraid," Elisha declared, his voice cutting through the unease. "For those who are with us are more than those against us." He turned to the heavens, raising his hands once more in prayer, this time asking for a revealing of spiritual truth. "Open their eyes, Lord, that they may see the army of heaven, ever ready to fight on our behalf." At that moment, a miracle unfolded. The hearts of the people were emboldened when suddenly a great trembling shook the ground, and the skies burst open. They gazed, seeing a vast multitude of fiery chariots descending from above, surrounding the valley, their presence a profound display of God's angelic hosts, standing as a barrier between them and their foe. A collective gasp escaped the crowd, eyes wide in astonishment, as the truth of Elisha's words became manifest. They witnessed the sheer number of divine warriors, their armaments glistening, a protective shield granted through the grace of God. The widow, sensing the sway of faith, exclaimed, "Our God is with us. Who can stand against the Lord?" As this realization swept through them, courage began to replace fear, igniting a fervor that transcended all earthly understanding. The people began to praise and worship, their voices echoing through the valley, a cacophony of faith proclaiming the greatness of their God. However, unbeknownst to them, in the ranks of the enemy, disarray unfolded. Each soldier, feeling an enormous weight of dread, began to lose their resolve. The clamor of praise from the Shunamites echoed, reverberating within their very souls. They began to turn back in confusion, casting fearful glances towards one another. Elisha, sensing the tide turning, beckoned the people to move. "Now is the time to act. With confidence in his deliverance, we shall face our enemies. Let us not waver but step boldly towards our victory." With his exhortation, the Shunamites moved as one, emboldened by faith, ready to defend not only their homes but their very lives. Just then, the echoes of prophetic declaration sung throughout the valley, reminding them, "The battle is the Lord's, and he fights for us." As they advanced, the air shifted, heavy with anticipation. The instant approached when God's preparation would be fully revealed. The skies were alight with angelic hosts, the earth itself heralding a sacred confrontation that would unveil the fullness of God's sovereign plan, a revelation still to come, whispering of moments where faith would intertwine with miraculous intervention. Could it be that through this act of divine intervention, God sought to awaken not just the people of Shunem, but a whole nation to the unparalleled glory of his might? The answer was destined to unveil through the shadows of impending conflict, where faith and divine action would meet like never before. As the faithful advanced, their hearts now fused in unwavering resolve, the sounds of their worship ascended like a sweet aroma before the Lord. Elisha, emboldened by the sight of the heavenly battalion, turned his gaze upon the approaching enemy. "The Lord has set our course, and in his strength, we shall not falter. He declared, his voice a clarion call that pierced the thickening air. The opposing soldiers, feeling the weight of dread pulling at their hearts, began to fumble their weapons and falter in their formation. A great confusion broke out among them, for they could not fathom the source of their growing fear. The captain of the enemy forces, a man of great reputation named Ben-Hadad, raised his voice above the tumult. "What is this madness? Why do you tremble? Man up and let us crush these rebels. We are many." But even as he spoke, a shiver coursed through him, and the very ground seemed to devour his confidence. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, and many felt the impulse to flee. The sound of drums and chariots quickly turned to whispers and cries of uncertainty, as the echoes of Shunammite praises rang louder, for his mercy endures forever. Elisha, undeterred, rallied the people of Shunem, their hearts now ignited with divine fervor. "Charge, O people of God! The Lord goes before us. Cast away fear and let us claim the victory that he has promised." With one unified voice, they cried out, echoing their trust in the Almighty. The infantry took their positions, propelled by a force far greater than their physical strength. Their faith transformed into an unstoppable wave. As they marched forward, the dust kicked up around their feet, and the sunlight glimmered off the fiery hosts above. Suddenly, a great voice boomed from the heavens, reverberating through the valley. "I have heard your cries, O people of Israel. Fear not, for I am with you, I will fight your battles." Each word seemed to resonate within the very bones of the warriors, imploring them to press forward in confidence. Elisha raised his rod, a symbol of divine authority, and commanded into the unfolding chaotic spectacle. "Let the Lord arise." His voice echoed, merging with the mighty chorus of heaven, shaking the very foundations of the earth to its core. In that instant, the angelic hosts responded with a great surge forward, illuminating the battlefield with divine light that blinded the enemy. The soldiers of Ben-Hadad, now engulfed by confusion and fear, turned upon one another, their swords clashing in misdirected fury. "Who are we fighting?" they shouted in dismay, their unity unraveling under the force of divine intervention. Amidst the chaos, Elisha turned to the people, his face aglow with radiant faith. "The Lord has turned the hearts of our enemies against themselves. Rejoice, for the victory is near." With this declaration, they launched forward, emboldened, each step sealing their triumph. As the clash of steel rang through the valley, and the dust settled, Elisha saw the unfolding of an even greater plan, a plan not only for a single city but for a nation yearning for deliverance. "Truly, O Lord, your ways are higher than our ways," he murmured, as the power of God unfurled before his eyes. In the midst of victory, a soft whisper came to him, intertwining with the very fabric of the moment. "This battle will echo beyond this hour, it shall lay a foundation for hearts to be changed, and my covenant shall flourish." Thus, the shout of triumph resounded through Shunem, yet in Elisha's heart, the seeds of mystery were sown. What further divine revelations awaited through this confrontation? As the dust settled, the pages of history trembled, poised for the prophetic transformations that were yet to reveal the fullness of God's sovereign purpose in the lives of his people. With the cries of victory echoing like a thunderclap in the hills surrounding Shunem, Elisha stood steadfast, a watchman of the unfolding divine tapestry. The remnants of the enemy forces scattered like chaff before the wind, their hearts gripped with terror and confusion. The faithful of Israel watched with wide eyes, caught between the clamor of battle and the stillness of God's presence. "See what the Lord has done!" Elisha shouted, his voice lifting above the tumult. "For he has not abandoned his people. Let us gather the spoils of this day, for the Lord has fought for us." As they ventured forth, their hands trembling with awe and reverence, the spoils of war were laid bare before their eyes, abundant treasures abandoned by the fleeing soldiers. Gold gleamed like the sun, and provisions overflowed like the blessings of God. In that moment, the people knew, God's provision was evident, and his faithfulness unyielding. Yet within Elisha, a deeper movement stirred. He sensed that the victory extended far beyond mere riches or military triumph. What does the Lord desire for his people? He pondered, his heart attuned to the still small voice that often spoke in silence. And lo, as the dust of battle began to clear, a stranger approached, weary yet steadfast. It was a messenger from the king of Israel, sent to inquire about the state of affairs. He bowed low before Elisha, his eyes wide with both hope and fear. "Prophet of the Most High, we have heard the tumult from the hills. Has the Lord granted us victory over our oppressor?" Elisha nodded. "Indeed, the Lord has shattered the plans of Ben-Hadad. But greater still is his intention. Judgment has been purposed against those who refuse to bow to his sovereignty." The messenger's brow furrowed as understanding dawned. What does that mean for Israel? It is a new dawn for God's people. Elisha proclaimed, his eyes aflame with prophecy. For the Lord desires to draw his people closer, to restore the wayward, and to reveal the hope that has been shrouded in despair. The hearts that once turned against him will once again rend for righteousness. As the messenger departed, the weight of Elisha's words lingered like an echo in the valley, dancing on the wind. The faithful gathered around him, their hearts ignited not only by victory but by the hope of transformation. The atmosphere crackled with divine anticipation, yet a whisper of concern flickered in their minds. What more must we endure? They wondered silently, pondering the next chapter of their collective journey. Days passed, and news spread across the land of the great defeat suffered by the Arameans. Elisha's words became a clarion call, uniting hearts across the nation as they turned toward their God, seeking his face once more. Countless souls were drawn to worship, eager to see the manifestation of his mercy. But remnant shadows lingered, remnants of a faith once solid now wavering. What if our enemies return? They quaked in hushed tones, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Ben-Hadad. And in the quiet of that trepidation, God spoke. "I am the Lord your God, I will not be shaken. My plans extend beyond this moment." A new urgency filled Elisha as he sensed another turning was imminent. He called the elders of Israel to him, "Prepare yourselves, for the Lord will reveal his next act. There are greater wonders of his restoration to unfold." The hearts of the assembly trembled in anticipation. What would this mean? Time itself seemed suspended, waiting for revelation. Elisha's spirit surged with the understanding, the battle was but a prelude, a hint of the miraculous transformations yet to be revealed. Could it be that even in their greatest victories, God's sovereign plan would push beyond their comprehension? The very foundations of faith were about to be reshaped, and as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting an ethereal glow upon the land, a profound peace enveloped Elisha's heart. "Lord," he whispered, "let your will be done." The stage was set for divine encounters and revelations that would turn the hearts of a nation and awaken a prophecy long foretold. For in the tapestry of human struggle, God's sovereign hand was weaving a narrative of hope, and the faithful awaited the next unfolding of his glorious plan. As the dawn broke with gentle rays, casting light upon the faces of the assembled in Shunem, an expectant silence blanketed the crowd. Elisha, standing resolute, the warmth of faith radiating from him, turned to the people assembled, now a tapestry entwined with stories of deliverance and awe. "The Lord our God is a God of promise," he declared, his voice ringing clear, "a God who does not forget his covenant with his people. The time has come for us to see his compassion anew." The widow, whose heart had journeyed from despair to joy, stood at the forefront, her sons beside her as witnesses of God's unyielding faithfulness. They had endured the valley of shadows, yet the light now broke forth, illuminating their path. "Let us remember his wondrous works," she proclaimed, her voice filled with conviction. "For every trial we have faced has only served to magnify the greatness of our God." With words of encouragement, Elisha continued, turning their gaze outward. "Today, we shall gather together not just as those who have been saved but as a community transformed by his mercy. Let us go forth and share of the abundant grace we have received, testifying to the power of faith that overcomes all trials." As the people responded with murmurs of agreement, the merchant who had first encountered the widow stepped forward, his heart now ignited with a newfound spirit of generosity. "I will provide for the needs of the poor among us," he declared, inspired by the widow's story of divine provision. "Let us create a legacy of healing and hope," he added, eyes glistening with purpose. And so it was that the faithful united, pooling their resources and blessings to serve those in need. The townsfolk set to work, digging deep within their own lives, bringing forth the overflow of their hearts to support each other. The widow, leading by example, opened her home, and day by day, miracles of reconciliation and restoration unfolded. In the gathering momentum of their collective faith, Elisha sensed the stirring winds of a greater purpose. He called upon the elders once more, urging them to seek out those in neighboring lands who needed the mercies they had experienced. "For the Lord's way extends beyond us," he taught, "and our testimony will ripple through generations like a mighty river of hope. Prepare to go forth, for he has destined us to be vessels of his grace beyond Shunem." United in boldness, the people embarked upon their journey. They traveled to surrounding regions, bearing the message of God's faithfulness, telling of the widow whose empty vessel became a fountain of abundance. They called upon others to remember that God was intimately aware of their struggles and could transform desperation into testimony. As they journeyed, they encountered faces weary from loss and burdened with despair. Yet wherever they spoke, faith was ignited, and hearts were turned toward the living God. News of the miraculous flow of oil spread, intertwining with the ancient prophecies of restoration. People from distant lands began to gather, drawn by the stories of hope. Days turned to weeks, and a movement was born, one that transcended geographical boundaries, drawing the lost, broken, and weary into a communal embrace of faith. Miracles became commonplace as many witnessed healings, provision, and renewed friendships. Elisha rejoiced in the unity forged among the people. "See what the Lord has done. He has taken our fears and turned them into a shared mission, drawing our hearts together for his glory. And let us not forget, he goes before us." Even the elder who once questioned the widow found himself among those transformed by the relentless flow of God's grace. He cast away his skepticism and joined the voices of praise as they sang verses of hope intertwined with the stories of their miraculous past. As the sun set on Shunem, Elisha and the widow stood before the crowd, two hearts woven together by faith's unbreakable bond. "Today," Elisha said, "is not the end, but the beginning of a legacy that proclaims God's everlasting love. For we are his people, a chosen generation called to bear witness of his goodness." In that twilight hour, with the stars unfurling like promises across the heavens, they commemorated the manifestations of God's faithfulness with hymns of gratitude echoing through the valley. Each word spun a web of connection to generations yet to come, each note a declaration that would resonate forevermore. And as the night enveloped the city, the testimony of the widow flowed through the hearts of many, as they learned that true faith called them deeper, not only to embrace their blessings but to extend them generously to others. Thus, in the annals of God's narrative, Shunem became known as a beacon of hope, a testament to faith that flourishes amid adversity. And so we see how from one widow's humble obedience, a tapestry of divine blessings unfurled, reaching the very ends of the earth, a harmonious song of faith and provision that would echo through eternity. Now is the time for you to join this journey of faith. Subscribe immediately to our channel and never miss a powerful story of God's work. Leave a like to help spread God's word through the algorithm and let others discover his faithfulness. Share your reflections in the comments. How has this story impacted your life? And don't wait another moment, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear of God's truth and love. Together, let us spread the testimony of Jesus Christ and his miraculous ways.